Well, this is Bob here. We're going to be going over installing a 62 kilowatt hour battery from Vivine today into a 2014 Nissan Leaf. I ordered this in April of 2025. It showed up around July of 2025. I got it duty paid delivery, so everything showed up at my door. I didn't have to arrange shipping or anything, and all of the import duties had already been taken care of. It was a relatively smooth transaction. The page was a little sketchy, but that was kind of to be expected when dealing directly with a factory in China. Everything came pretty well packaged. A lot of crates individually wrapped, and then each cell was nicely labeled with packing lists. I didn't have anything missing that was expected going through all of this. I had a pretty nice stack of hardware too that I don't know what to do with. We'll just keep going through all the different pictures here before we move on to the actual installation. While we flip through these pictures, we can talk about some of the tools that are necessary when doing these. I bought a VIVNE car hoist, one of the dual pillar setups. I did go with the heavier duty of the two options that you can usually find both on Amazon and directly from VIVNE. This car weighs quite a bit, so I went with the heavier one just to get that extra lift and weight capacity. I also purchased a set of insulated screwdrivers and also a socket insulator to go between a hand wrench and a traditional socket set. I also have access to your normal mechanic set of tools, so impact drivers, quarter-inch drivers, a full set of 3/8, quarter-inch, and half-inch sockets. Nothing crazy on any of this. When doing one of these, you're going to want to be ready to do a lot of shimmying unless you have access to a full lift. All of this video is going to be at 4 times speed. Pretty excruciating to watch otherwise. We'll get some ASMR of bolt sounds for the next probably 10 minutes. Looking back, I probably should have got a set of body panel removal screwdrivers or one of those fork attachments that you see on Amazon. I ended up breaking about half of these. Luckily, they're fairly standard diameters, so you can just get a set to replace all of these. It's always great to remember to have your safety squints ready for when the dirt falls off of these plastic shields on the underside. I did only record for the portions that were not in the tutorial or guide video that Vivine put out or that I'd seen other YouTubers put out. So this is mostly going to be focused on the actual removal process rather than the cell installation or disassembly. This connector set was the hardest part to take apart. The safety mechanism on it is very difficult to describe, and you kind of have to feel it, and you do not want to pry on it too hard with a screwdriver. It's just a lot of shimmying and pulling, and I found one video that helped, but largely there was no way for me to get a good angle on this, so I apologize for anyone trying to do this. This is an instance where I opted to use a breaker bar rather than an impact. I didn't want to snap any of these bolts as they hold up that battery assembly, and it's about 700 pounds directly above you. So slow and steady wins the race here. So here I'm getting a set of dollies that I purchased from Harbor Freight. I believe each of these is rated for 500 pounds. I'm not 100% sure. They're still out in my garage a year later being used as another set of dollies, and I actually used a chunk of one of the crates as that structure between the two. This was the only way I could think of to cheaply get that battery out and still get it under once these lifts are in place. Even with this dolly being as low profile as it is, I still had to put a jack underneath the rear axle. I don't think I have footage of that, but I actually jacked up on both rear tires just to get that axle out of the way, because the rear bump on the battery, once you've put in the new cells, actually can't fit underneath the axle. I would say you're able to do about 90 to 95% of this job solo. The parts that I would recommend having a second person for are actually the alignment when putting the battery back in. Moving that battery around solo and lining it up is pretty hard. These front two sets of bolts just had a lot of corrosion on the backside. They were by far the most time-consuming part of actually getting this battery out. A lot of this walking back and forth right now is me actually going through and checking how evenly I've removed the bolts on all sides. And you can see here in this next part the entire battery assembly actually start to sink down onto those dollies. We get to jump cut past when I actually pulled the battery out as my camera had died, and I didn't notice until about an hour later after I'd taken a break. These top bolts had a lot of corrosion. It actually surprised me how poor a condition they were in. I used a normal socket for a lot of them, and then I actually went and got a rounded head extraction tool that I had on the tool bench to take out the rest. The best hammer is the thing closest to you that is hammer shaped. I got a little purchase happy on this project going to Harbor Freight. Bought a wireless oscillating tool and then 3 different blades to try out for cutting this seal. The one that ended up working the best was the double-sided hook blade. Once more, my camera died while I was cutting this, so we only get to see this first part, and then suddenly it'll be open. And like magic, it's open now. And here's where your insulated gloves and insulated screwdrivers will come in handy. Currently, this pack is around 400 volts, which is more than enough to kill you. It can arc quite a ways. So you want to be pretty careful during these portions. Taking this apart, I did focus on disconnecting this entire circuit first so that we could get to the lowest possible voltage when handling these modules. As you can tell here, my garage is extremely organized, and I always know what I'm looking for. At this point, I am trying to take apart as many of the high voltage lines as I can, and then disconnecting all of the balance leads. Those are those white connectors. There's a lot of mounting screws on this entire battery pack. This is one area where, looking back, I kind of wish I would have gotten a full set of high voltage sockets. I did have an isolator between the wrench and my hands, but when you have those extensions in there, there is some risk of arcing out and getting yourself. I do have multiple layers of protection, but it is still not ideal. this is where the video ends, and I have still images from here on out. Both the Vivine installation video and other YouTubers have covered from here pretty well. I did use an engine hoist to remove the larger rear module when I was doing this, as it's about 110 pounds. The Vivine modules do a pretty good job of telling you where they're going to go. I do remember being slightly confused on the orientation of these two front modules, more because I was not reading the instructions very well, and it was about 2 a.m. when I got to this portion. I think my main complaint on this entire kit is the lack of the winter package. This battery is not heated in the winter. Nissan did a similar thing on their very early battery packs, but quickly realized that it was way more efficient and good for longevity of the batteries to keep those warm in the dead of winter. My other only complaint in this project would probably be putting the seal onto this gasket. It was very nasty smelling and kind of stuck to everything. These spacers were pretty nice that they sent in. Here's all my other extra wiring that was not reused. And then I forgot to put the bracket back on the battery and was actually able to at least reassemble that from the outside. And then this is my first initial charge. I only got it up to about 60.7. I have one cell that does not seem to want to fully charge, so I've never actually gotten that above around 61 kilowatt hours. It's not unusual to see that actual doesn't match the advertised 100%. And then here are some of my readings after 10,000 miles. Overall, I've driven about 10,000 miles total. That's 128 miles a day. I haven't seen any reported degradation in that time frame. I think that could possibly be because I've never actually drained it below about 8%, and it's typically charged up to about 95, so I don't see those two peaks that really hurt battery health overall. As you can see in the picture, I do have a Chevy Bolt. The two vehicles are very comparable. The Nissan is a much lower trim, so it doesn't have cruise control, it doesn't have a heat pump, so there are the negatives there. If I could go back and do it all again, I maybe would just buy another Chevy Bolt. The one I have pictured there is a salvage title, so I actually spent about $2,000 less overall on that vehicle compared to the Leaf with the new battery. However, I did use the Leaf's old cells on a off-grid solar setup that is charging both vehicles, which is why I have two electric cars, because it was actually cheaper to buy that entire Chevy Bolt versus an equivalent amount of batteries. I am, however, pretty pleased with the product that Vivine offered. It's lived up to the expectations so far. The only thing I maybe would like them to do going forward is either reuse or have their own heating solution. I did drop down to about 52 kilowatt hours of capacity in the wintertime just because of that cold. I have heard of people using heat blankets and other things to bring that temperature up. I just wasn't comfortable doing that. Vivine also came out with their own solution for building a battery for solar from your existing cells. That was not available when I ordered mine. It's the only thing I really have some FOMO on. They also came out with, I believe it's a 68 kilowatt hour battery. I don't think I would have sprung for that, as I don't need that extra battery, but it was a nice option to have. If you're still watching, thank you for tuning in, and if you've got any questions, I do read the comments. Thank you.